Okay, so despite my YubiKey doing what YubiKeys do, welcome to Social Forensication. This is a multidisciplinary approach to successful social engineering. I am J.Gray. Before we get started, the thoughts and opinions I represent do not meet those of IBM. I just want you to know that twice, by the way. I say that because I'm a senior security architect there, although I typically don't admit it. I am the 2017 DerbyCon Social Engineering Capture the Flag winner. My team got third place at the NOLACon OSINT CTF in 2018 and 2019, as well as second place this year at B-Sides Atlanta. I write for Forbes from time to time, and I do training, and I'm currently under contract to write a book with No Starch Press. Because my black badge is handmade, it took a year for them to make it. It's one of a kind. It has my name on it. It doesn't leave the house, so this is the closest that most people will ever see of the DerbyCon black badge. This is the closing ceremony. Some of you may recognize Christopher Hadnaghy presenting me with the winner's trophy from that. So to get into the meat and potatoes of the actual talk, basically, we're going to talk very briefly about the basics of social engineering, just kind of to lay the groundwork to make sure everyone's on pretty much the same page. And then we'll talk about existing attacks, maybe some familiar names or faces. And then we'll talk a little bit about memory forensics and rogue Wi-Fi, things you can do with Wi-Fi. And then look at the considerations, so your decision-making process before you decide to execute such an attack, how you actually execute it. And then, because not everyone's on the red team, not everyone's a pen tester, there's a lot of blue team, a little bit about the mitigations, and then time permitting, I've got recorded demonstrations of the attacks as well. So, getting into social engineering, the basics of social engineering. At its most rudimentary basis, social engineering is human hacking. That's why Chris Hadnaghy, the CEO of Social Engineering Inc., is on Twitter at Human Hacker. That's why his books are Social Engineering, the Art of Human Hacking, and Social Engineering, the Science of Human Hacking. So there's a reason that's behind that, because basically you're trying to influence people to do one of two things in a broad stroke, and that is give you a piece of information or do something. Give me your password. I have a badge in my backpack. I'm willing to go international with it. I've actually got a password inspector badge. So if anyone wants their passwords inspected, just see me in the hallway afterwards. I'll make sure it's up to code. Or performing an action. We typically think of click a link, execute a file. If you want to get a little bit more creative, though, why not call the firewall administrator and ask them to open port 445 or 4444 to the public internet? I mean, that could be probably more catastrophic than anything you could do with their password. So when we get into social engineering, there are various types. And you've probably heard numerous presentations about phishing and vishing. And while they're fun, they're really not the crux of this presentation. This presentation is taking into account the physical aspect. And I'm not really going to talk so much about how to break into a facility or any of that. I'm going to talk more about building rapport and getting someone to actually let you in. And then, of course, we have dumpster diving and baiting as well. Another thing that I always like to bring up, I get a lot of questions of, I want to get into social engineering. How do I do this? Because there's really no roadmap. I mean, if you want to become a SOC analyst, there's a roadmap. If you want to become a pen tester, there's a roadmap. There's a roadmap if you want to do forensics. There's not really one for social engineering. So these are the 5 disciplines that cumulatively make up social engineering. You've got your improv. You've got that because if you're doing a phishing phone call or you're in person, you have to improv on the fly. You can have everything planned out, but something's going to go wrong. You could be making phone calls, trying to get them to go to an external website, but the problem that's going to come with that is what happens when they don't have external internet access. You have to be able to improvise and get around that. And the same goes for in person. I think it was Mark Twain that said that the hardest part about telling lies is keeping them all straight. And that is certainly applicable to social engineering. When you're doing in person, especially, you need to be skilled with acting. You need to be able to get in that character and perform as that character. When I have my password inspector badge on, my name is Donnie Butts. It's just what it is until the badge comes off. Well, sometimes. And then because you're dealing with humans, you're trying to influence humans into doing something, you have to understand the psychology of it, and we'll discuss that a little bit more on the next slide. Of course, the InfoSec piece, because you need to know what kind of defenses you may be up against or something to that effect. And then, of course, technical writing, because as much as we all hate it, we all have to write reports. It is what it is, just get used to it. So, about the psychological concepts of social engineering. I believe it was in 2006, Dr. Robert Cialdini came up with a book called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, and he boils all aspects of persuasion down to these 6 principles. Those of you who were at the DEF CON meeting earlier this week got my car sales person pitch about how they manipulate these 6 principles, but I won't go into them very deep here. But anyway, reciprocity. It's also known as quid pro quo. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. For example, one of my favorite things to do when demonstrating social engineering is go out into the public and find people who are trying to take like an awkward selfie, and I'm like, hey, would you like me to take that picture for you? I take the picture for him. After it's over, oh, hey, could you provide me with whatever arbitrary piece of information that we've all agreed upon trying to collect, whether it be mother's maiden name or password or something like that. And typically, because I just took a picture for them and they didn't have to have some awkward selfie, I get it. Commitment and consistency. People don't, as humans, we like patterns. We like what we are used to. If we stick with that, it works very well. We can influence things by maintaining it as it is. Conversely, you can also elicit other reactions by disrupting that consistency, but that's a completely different creature. Social proof. Successful people of said gender at your age do things of this nature. Cool. I'm not subscribing to it, but car salespeople are the worst, especially if you're a male in your early to mid-30s. They're going to try to put you in the most expensive 2-seat car possible. Likability. Show of hands in here. Who has ever met a salesperson that didn't at least attempt to be likable? Whether they're likable or not, it's not the question. We know the answer to this. It's just attempt. Exactly. Authority. People tend to do things when someone in a position of authority, whether it be government or your boss, wants you to do it. My favorite pretext to use on the phone is, hi, I'm calling under the authority of insert executive, CISO, CEO, owner, whatever, and I need this information. I just name drop them. That's it. And then scarcity. That one is supplies are very limited. You must act now. You have no time to stop and think about it. You must act if you want this now. So, urgency. So, show of hands. Anybody know this guy here? Okay. He keeps Pepsi in business via his copious consumption of Diet Pepsi. It's Jason Street. He's known to gain access, excuse me, to gain access and plug in things, specifically rubber duckies. Well, for the most part, with what he's trying to do, to my knowledge, he doesn't go drop in malware, but I know that some operators on the offensive side of security tend to drop malware when they may use a rubber ducky. But I've never really heard anybody talking about taking data out. So when you think about this from an adversarial perspective, when you are on a client site or you're in a client environment, whether it be digitally or physically, your biggest concern is detection. So what if I told you you could collect this information and walk right out the door so you don't have to worry about the detection? So here's what you're going to need. You're going to need an external hard drive or a thumb drive, potentially, and that's the top left and the bottom right. On the bottom left and the top right, we have two Hack 5 tools, one of which being the Bash Bunny, that's on the bottom left, which is very similar to the rubber ducky, which is on the top right. As you'll see, the chip on the front of that rubber ducky actually tells the computer that you plug it into that this is a keyboard, and it types it as if someone is typing the commands in to the computer. That's how it subverts the any data loss prevention software. So the bash bunny is basically the same thing, except for you can put 2 payloads on it. It's got a 3-position switch, and you can't expand the memory, whereas you can on the rubber ducky because on the backside there is a micro SD card. Additionally, for this, you'll obviously need a computer. You don't need it on site with you, although you could do some stuff with it if you would like. You need Volatility, which is included in both Kali and Sift, which is the SANS Investigative Forensics Toolkit. And then you'll need something to acquire the memory. For a Windows environment, I recommend FTK Imager Lite because I don't like to pay for things, and I also don't like to pirate things. So things that are around the price of free to free 99, that's what I typically go with. And FTK Imager Lite is free. So in terms of the process of the actual social forensication, here's what we're going to do. We're going to gain access. Okay, how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to take some time. We're going to run some OSINT investigations. We're going to find out about the operations of the organization. We're going to find out about security defenses they have in place. We might look for some specific employees to target, and we probably want to find some specific employees that are off limits. Because for this, we obviously don't want to go targeting their technology department, specifically security. You probably don't want procurement because they would have knowledge of an existing contract. And then additionally, anyone who's in a position that may have a lot of memory. We don't want video editors with 64 gigs of RAM, and there's a reason why. And I'll explain it a little bit later. But once we're in, we impersonate a forensic consultant. How do we do this? Hi, my name is Sony Tark, and I am a forensic consultant with Stark Industries. We have been consulted by your company because malicious activity has been detected. Your computer itself does not appear to be infected, but another infected machine on the network has been communicating with yours, and I just need to take a forensic image so I can take it back to my mobile lab and verify that there's no malware on your computer. You've done nothing wrong. So in doing that, we are initially scaring them, we're playing to that emotion, but then we're immediately bringing them back down by saying, we don't think you've done anything wrong. So explain to them, this is going to take just a few minutes. I'll sit here. You don't even have to log out. I'll just plug this in, get the memory, and we'll be done. No big deal. You don't even have to leave. In fact, I would prefer you stay here with me. Why? Because if they leave, they can go get coffee, say something to the coworkers about, oh, there's a forensic consultant at my desk taking a memory image. And it may just so happen that the head of security is getting coffee and say, what forensic consultant? And you're busted. But anyway, you're going to build that rapport. And the whole time you're there, you need to be prepared to have conversation and keep this person engaged. Because realistically, you don't even want them getting up to go to the bathroom. You want them right there with you throughout the whole thing. Take the image, walk out the door. Once you're out the door, here's how you accomplish pwnage. So you load the image. And when I say load the image, what I mean is you plug in the thumb drive and you navigate to that directory in either Sift or Kali. So no big deal there. Once you're actually in, then you use the appropriate volatility modules, which I'll discuss a little bit later, and then you attain pwnage. Somewhat different from these creatures from South Park, the underpants gnomes. You actually have to have a defined process to get there. You actually need to know what step 2 is, and step 2 obviously would be the modules. So in gaining access, how are we going to do this? Well, Vistaprint. To my knowledge, Vistaprint doesn't care if you're an employee of CrowdStrike, FireEye, Systream, whoever. They don't care. All they care about is that the credit card that you're giving them is valid and you give them a valid address. So you can get business cards made that say whatever you want. If you want an ID card, QuickIDcard.com will do that. To my knowledge, they don't vet them either. If you're in the United States and you run into Skydog at a conference, He will make you badges. In fact, he made my password inspector badge. You probably need a clipboard because everybody in social engineering, and especially Jenny Radcliffe out of the UK, always stresses, always carry a clipboard because it makes it look like you're in a position of authority. And, I mean, realistically, you might need to write some stuff down. There's a couple things you do need to write down when you're doing this. So, take a laptop with a briefcase or a backpack, because if you do, when we get to the wireless portion, that's something that you can do. You could easily have another laptop hanging out in your backpack, running a Wi-Fi Pineapple or running your own rogue access point, whatever you want to do, and people are none the wiser. And then have your solid pretext. And by solid pretext, if you're trying to be a modern forensic consultant, you probably don't want to come dressed like this. Although I could see Daryl over here coming dressed like that. So, when we're getting the memory image, there's a few things we need to take into account, especially in the United States, and I think it's becoming a worldwide phenomenon now, because of everything that happened with Manning and Snowden and all that stuff. Everyone in the U.S. is ultra trigger shy about letting people remove things from work networks on thumb drives. So they've started implementing data loss protection software. So with that, there's a lot of different ways that it works, but the way that we're focusing on for this is not allowing to write to the thumb drive. And that could complicate your process, just being honest. Because through this process, through the research associated with this presentation, I learned quite a few things that are highly applicable and could be deal breakers for you. But anyway, with these, we have the assumption that they are or they are not using data loss prevention software. So if they aren't, you can use a regular USB device. If they are using it, you're pretty much limited to a rubber ducky. And then if you use a rubber ducky, you have to understand Ducky script and Ducky Code, which are proprietary languages used to execute things within the rubber ducky. If you're going to try to write to the rubber ducky, you have to flash the firmware with a firmware called Twin Ducky. And then if you're going to actually get the memory image, and this is the thing that the preconceived notion that completely shattered my entire hypothesis with this, you have to have some sort of admin rights. So if the user that you're sitting with and you've convinced to let you do things is not an admin, whether it be local or domain, you're not going to be able to get a memory image. But there's more that you could do. So you may need to run some PowerShell or whichever language is appropriate, privilege escalation scripts. So there are a few out there like Level Up, Unix PrivEsc check, various things like that. Then once you actually get that privilege escalation, run FTK Imager, take the memory image, and get out, like quick. So realistically, that would be the process. If they don't have the DLP, then basically it's use the USB device, consider you may have to do privilege escalation, so have your scripts on it, capture the image, walk out the door. So, but with this, we need a little bit of OSINT. We need to know about the culture of the organization. Are users trained for this kind of shenanigans? Some probably are. So you want to try to find the naive users. So if you can find their employees on social media, I always recommend looking for the ones that are always doing the quizzes on Facebook about what does your name tell you about your spirit animal or something to that effect. Yeah, I'm not a fan of those quizzes. It took me 2 years to break my mom of doing those quizzes. I'm like, Mom, how much information do you give those? She's like, I only answer like 5 questions. I looked at him, I was like, well, no wonder somebody got into your email. You basically reset your password for them. So, I mean, look for those types of people. When you're considering the platforms that they use, and you can find that via the career pages, I mean, especially if they're using a Mac, this whole bag is full of nothing but dongles for this Mac. So if you're going into a Mac shop, you probably need the dongles. And there's a reason why. I mean, if you're a forensic consultant hired by a company, you should already know what the environment consists of, and you should already come prepared, because that's going to make whoever you work for look bad. So make sure you have that, and then it'll also help you preload any software that you need. So that'll tell you, do you need to be running with Python? Do you need to be running with PowerShell? What? Do they have DLP? And you may be able to find that out using OSINT. My favorite places for such a thing would probably be the career site and the resume pages on Indeed. I'm not sure what platforms are used over here. I've seen some international postings on Indeed, so I'm not sure if you have other things as well. Glassdoor, if that's used over here as well. Company reviews, that's a good place as well. You also want to know about their antivirus and their endpoint detection and response software. Because if you're going to have to do privilege escalation, you're probably going to need to know what they're using so you can actually test it and make sure you can bypass whatever they have. So make sure. User rights, obviously you want to target someone who has admin rights. And then the culture, and then factor in how much time it's going to take you to collect. So your limitations, the user itself. The user may just say no and threaten to call security. If that's the case, bye-bye, I'm gone. I'm going to go find somebody else. I'm going to go hang out in the smoking area, and I'm going to wait until people come out on their break, and then I'm going to follow someone in and tell them the same thing. User permissions. If they're not admin, you might be in for a rough ride. Vulnerability management posture. If their vulnerability management is weak, you have a better chance of privilege escalation. So, and then time. Through my research on DDR4, it takes approximately 2 to 2.25 times the number of gigs of RAM in minutes. So for 2 gigs of RAM, it took me 4.5 minutes. For 12 gigs, it took me about 26 minutes to collect the memory image. So keep this in mind. This is why you don't want to go for someone with 64 gigs of RAM, because you're going to be sitting there for 2.5 hours. I can entertain someone for 4 minutes. I mean, apparently I've already entertained people for about 20 here. So, I mean, I could probably already collected 12 gigs of RAM with this. 2.5 hours, I'm struggling to entertain myself, just to be honest. So, within using Volatility, about Volatility, it's an open sourced memory forensics tool. It was initially just Volatility, and then it forked. So some of you may be familiar with a tool called Recall that's maintained by Google now and part of Google Rapid Response. That is a fork of Volatility. They basically came from the same source code, but they're not quite the same anymore. It is native to both Sift and Kali. I've looked at the modules included with Kali and the modules included with Sift. I will tell you that for the most part, I would use Sift for this because you have a lot more to choose from in terms of the modules. Although, with that being said, you can just go and either write your own module or download modules from GitHub or other locations to put onto the system as well. It's a little bit trickier, so there's that, but you don't have to confine yourself to this. I mean, if you wanted to install Volatility on a vanilla Debian box, you could do that, and you could put whatever modules you want on it. So, variables. So in the syntax of doing Volatility, it's vol.py, and then typically you have to use the -f switch to show which file you're targeting, and then -- profile to say this is the profile we're using. You can actually do export volatility _ location or profile, and yes, those are 3 slashes on purpose, and define this so that you can just do vol.py, whatever module, conscan, mimikatz, whatever. And that's very important because also, you remember I said you might need to take a clipboard because you might need to write something down. In the Windows environment, while you're collecting this memory image, you probably also want to open up Control Panel and look at System to find out which build it is, because you have to define that. If it's Windows 7, you have to say Windows 7 x86 _ Service Pack 1, whatever. With Windows 10, it's Windows 10 _ 1706 or whatever. So you need to know that. And you can do it. There's actually a module for that. It's called Image Info. It's the third one down from the left here. You can do it, but it is a very tedious process. I attempted this on 12 gigs of RAM. I kicked it off before I went to bed. I slept my full 4.5 hours that I typically sleep, and it was still running when I got back up. And I killed every other process I could possibly kill so that it had maximum access to memory. Took a long time. So if you can have that in advance, it's going to make it easier. So other things you can do. Anyone ever heard of a thing called passing the hash? Yeah? Familiar concept? Well, you can get the hashes via hash dump. If you have the memory image and you execute hash dump, you're going to see the hashes contained within that system. Mimikatz, same thing. The one thing I will tell you is the version of Windows 10 that I tested this on, Mimikatz was not a very big fan of it. I didn't get a whole lot out of Mimikatz, but as we know, with Mimikatz, everything, it's a game of cat and mouse. Something is found, something works, Microsoft fixes it, something is found, something works, Microsoft fixes it, vicious cycle. So Mimikatz may or may not run. But there are other things you can do. Things like conscan and netscan, for example. You're familiar with the netstat command, right? Netstat minus NA or all that fun stuff. It's basically the same thing. So you can see which systems this is connected to and which systems were connected to it on which ports. So that's going to help you enumerate the internal topology. Dump certs. That's going to be getting like RSA certificates and the such. IE history, Chrome and Firefox. If you know your users or your target users' browsing habits, even if you're going to come back and social engineer a different way, say a fish, you now know where they're going. So you can actually like get laser precise with a spearfish and say, I know that you like to go to Tropicana.com. Would you like free orange juice for life? They go to Tropicana.com every day. What can I say? I picked it up in their browsing history. I mean, who doesn't want free orange juice for life? I think I'd get tired of it. But anyway, you can even also take screenshots. You can take a look at what's on their clipboard, so what they've been copying and pasting, and so many other aspects. I mean, possibilities are near endless. So it's really stealthy as well, because the only chances of detection, here comes the mitigation part, that you have are the physical detection of you coming in and out of the facility, the user that you talk to going to management on you, and then once you're actually plugging in, you have the plug-in and unplug events associated with the USB device. And then you have the process execution for FTK imager and the privilege escalation to get that. Those are your only events. So unlike a lot of other things, this is not very noisy. So you quite literally can do it with just a few events. Obviously, if you start running things like PowerUp or other privilege escalation utilities, that's going to become very noisy. So consider that within your detection model. So with your limitations, the operating system, as I stated before, Windows 10 and Mimikatz, the last time I tested it, don't play nice together. FTK Imager Lite only works on Windows, but if you want to do it on Mac, you can use Recall. There's a thing called Lime for Linux. I will say that if you can find someone on Windows 7, go for it, because it's going to be a lot easier. It's going to be hanging wide open. And then, of course, you've got time. And regarding the time, that's really going to be something that you're going to have to play your improv and your acting game on, because you have to keep someone entertained for that time frame. So moving into the Wi-Fi portion, why are we going to do this? Well, sometimes things just don't work out right. We might not have luck with our USB devices. They may actually have their USB ports physically shut in some way, shape, or form. They may be glued shut, cemented shut, something to that effect. We might not be able to do it. We may have gotten shut down. Okay, but we still want access because we're persistent people. That's how we are. This community of InfoSec and hackers, as a whole, we are probably the most determined and persistent group of people. We don't take no for an answer for the most part. Certain instances we most certainly do. But we just have that drive to learn and do more and solve the problem. So why not find a workaround, right? So with a rogue Wi-Fi access point, or just wireless hacking in general, it's not hard to get an Alpha network card. In fact, I've got one right here. And it cost me in US dollars about $55. It's the dual band, so it works all the way up to 802.11 AC. And honestly, it's injectable, meaning that you can inject packets and do things like your deauthentication and your fake authentication. Within Kali, interact with the Aircrack NG suite. It's not that hard to do. And then from there, once you're on that network, as packets are flying around, quite literally, just zooming right by you, you can actually run things like Responder and other utilities to gain access a different way. And depending on the organization's posture, they may be logging it, they may not. They may be, even if they are logging it, they may be pumping those logs into a SIM and analyzing, monitoring for detection. They may not be. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want to go with the fake Wi-Fi access point, there's two ways to go about it. You can set up the alpha card. You'll need two of them to do that, though, because you're going to have to pass it through. You're going to have one saying, I am whatever network you say you're looking for, and the other that's actually connected to the real network so that it can actually pass through. And if you have like an internal wireless card or you're on Ethernet, that works too. It'll just pass through your computer, which creates good PCAP opportunities. Or you could just use a Wi-Fi Pineapple. It doesn't have to be a Tetra. It could be a Nano. It doesn't matter. It's the Hack 5 products. If you want to see one, I've got one with me. I can show you after the presentation. So it's really not that challenging. So we are getting to the demo period. So I'm gonna show a little bit of stuff here. So we'll start out with the wireless piece. Oh, wrong way. So this is just looking, sniffing wireless networks to try to find the Pineapple. As we can see at the very top, it says Pineapple underscore BE1E. That's the last part of the MAC address. But if you want to find my Wi-Fi Pineapple now, if I'm running it, I assure you that the SSID for it is not a Pineapple. Not underscore A underscore Pineapple. I think there might be an underscore after that too. Anyway, so that's one of the simple things of going that route. So keep in mind that with a Wi-Fi Pineapple, even though it's an excellent utility, I'm just trying to find my mouse again, you still can get caught. So for cracking Wi-Fi, I kind of just play with the Aircrack suite in this. But basically, this is just showing how simple it is with it. As long as you've got the injectable packets, we've got it. Okay, we're getting it started. There's Airmon, there's all the networks. So we're going to choose one here. So we choose Waijitsu. Okay, so we're doing this. What we're looking for is hashtag data. We're looking for that count to go up. So here we're just playing with some stuff. This is the help page from Aircrack. So slowing it down a bit here. Basically what we're doing is that's actually deauthentication. So this is basically a denial of service on the network, and it's going to require anything else to reconnect. And that's going to steal those initialization vectors. But our data count is still at 0 because this is a WPA2 network. So doing some more stuff. This was a lot of trial and error. This is before I took Offensive Security's wireless course, so I'm a little bit all over the place with this, and I apologize for that. But okay, now we see the counts going up. We're at about 2,000. We're at 14. We need that to go up significantly because typically it takes about 80,000 packets of the data packets to actually be able to conduct the cryptanalysis. So as we near completion, I'm going to bump it ahead a little bit. Okay, so now our data packets are up to 1,700. And this is Aircrack itself going. and it took 29 minutes, 12 seconds. Password was Scoop 2009, and the S was capital, meaning we used 3 of the 4 typefaces. For many organizations, governments included, this is a 9-character password which meets complexity requirements. So the moral of that story with regards to WPA is WPA2 is strong, but it's based upon the quality of your password. So look at things like the EFF high entropy password list, introduce special characters. I love throwing spaces in things because it's just fun. So let's take a look at some Windows 7 memory analysis. So as you can tell, this is on Sift. So there's the volatility profile, volatility location, setting that right now. And for this, I named my thumb drive Leg4Co for Legitimate Forensics Company because we're totally legitimate. So in that case, let me go back briefly. So right now, here's Mimikatz. So there's the passwords associated with this Windows 7 system out of Mimikatz. NetScan, so this quite literally is showing us almost identical to what we would see in NetStat. So here we see something connected on HTTPS. There's some SMB, quite a bit of stuff that we can take a look at. So a lot of stuff to consider here, a lot of stuff to work with. Command scan, so this is what was actually input into the command line, so into cmd.exe. Get SIDS, that's going to tell us all the users and the groups. That was PS list, which if you're familiar, I'm completely drawing blank on what it was called. Anyway, there are 4 utilities within Volatility. One is called PS list, PS scan, PS map, and PS all, if I recall correctly. And basically, they look at the processes, the PIDs, the process name, several aspects with it. Procmon, that's what it is, Procmon and Sysmon. If you're familiar with those, these modules are almost identical to that. So now we're going to dump all the DLLs. So assuming we're an advanced adversary and we want to do something like process hollowing or something that may involve injecting something into DLLs, now we have a list of what DLLs are associated with it. We can manipulate those and see how we can get like file size around the same, probably not the same hash, something to that effect. So lots of things with the DLLs. There's a lot of chaos to be had with that. And all of these are dumped into a directory, so you can obviously play with them outside of memory. So there's the public certs. And that's it with that. So as you can see, with having the memory there, there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. And here actually is something I wrote in Ducky Code. I'll share the GitHub repo with you at the very end. But if you plug this in, what it will actually do, 2 things. It will actually steal the Wi-Fi password, write it to a file, put it on the desktop, and put it on the thumb drive. So even if it doesn't go to the thumb drive, you can still have it on the desktop. So let's take a quick look at that. So you plug it in. At this point, it was already plugged in. So we just verify, okay. There the commands go. So these are the things that you've put in via Ducky Code and Ducky script. So with that, it's its own language, but it ran. So as we can see here, the SSID was, let's talk about Hex Baby. If you know the Salt and Pepper song from the 90s. And the password 66, 61, 63, 65, 62. That is the hexadecimal representation of the phrase FACEB. So I like to use goofy passwords like dead beef and dead BIOS and Facebook. So I was trying to use Facebook with this one. So you've pulled it very simply out of the computer. So you can walk away with that, go back to your car, whip out the computer, connect to the Wi-Fi network, you're off to the races as well. Your detection, near minimum. And this is the perfect backup plan for if you cannot get a memory image. So, going back to the presentation, I just want to make you aware of a project that Brian Austin and myself have kicked off. It's called Through the Hacking Glass. It's a mentorship platform free of charge. We are in desperate need of mentors. We have about a 14-to-1 mentor to mentee ratio. So basically we aim to fill in the gaps between certifications and education. You can be both a mentor and a mentee. For more information, check us out on Twitter or Facebook, where we are both at Hacking Glass. Upcoming speaking engagements, we've got the Diana Initiative next. That's going to be in Vegas adjacent to DEF CON. I'm giving my Decepticon anti-OSINT talk. I'll be at Hacker Halted this year. And then Texas Cyber Summit and the Wild West Hackin' Fest. If anyone wants to come to the U.S. to Hacker Halted, here is a coupon code to get in for free. I can't help you with travel to get there, but I can help you with getting into the conference itself. So, and if you would like to come and actually take some of the training, CEH, CHFI, ECSA, CCSO, all of that will be offered. There's a 15% off training coupon code as well. So with that being said, we've got a few minutes to go. Here, I'll show you the links before I put that one up. So here are the links to some of the things. So Windows Privest Check, Bypass UAC, Exploit Suggester, all these things. These, if you're trying to go the privilege escalation route, these are resources that you could use to assist you with that. I've got a GitHub repo. This is where I've got my script stuff. Right now, I only have the Wi-Fi Stealer script there, but I'm working on others as I eventually find time. Like you, I'm pretty busy. Ducky Generator is another thing to look for, and it will actually help you create the Ducky Code. So, and that's quite possibly the hardest part of the whole process. So, any questions? If there are no questions, that's all, folks.